Greetings to you all. Greetings, members across the region, across the continent, in the very parts of the globe. Welcome to this policy dialogue session. Today, we're not on our regular policy dialogue sessions. Our next policy dialogue is on the 29th of July. We're looking at South Africa, acknowledging the failures, exploring the trajectory for a better political and economic future. We'll be analyzing inter alia what has happened recently, but also looking ahead, analyzing the nature of post-apartheid, the state, the ANC. And we'll have very able participants. That's next week, Thursday. This week, we have given the slot to my colleague, who has been a very important person, Farai Magu of CNRG, to present and launch the report, and in doing so, have a discussion around it. So we are happy as Supplies to be able to and give space to Farai and his group. This is not the first time. We have done that many times before. So Farai, welcome, and I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandaza, for creating this space for this important national dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for sparing time to join us for this conversation on a very difficult topic to discuss. It is a sensitive topic, we all know and agree. But nevertheless, it is a topic that we have to discuss as Zimbabweans. The purpose for this study and this seminar this evening is to ignite a conversation among ourselves as Zimbabwean citizens. It is public knowledge that our natural resources in Zimbabwe are not doing us any good as a people. This study comes after 13 years of working in the extractive sector, where I can safely say all the communities I visited across this country are not happy with the way their resources are being extracted and exploited. From that observation, we decided as a team that we embark on this investigation as to why are Zimbabwe's natural resources a source of frustration and anger among the citizens. And we tried to locate the role of these resources in Zimbabwe's elections. Admittedly, the findings of the research provokes a lot of anger as well, and the reactions, especially from the political actors. And that is well appreciated. Perhaps it is the purpose why we have to have this national dialogue. How can we cure this illness and ensure that Zimbabwe's natural wealth benefits the Zimbabwean citizens, but not only us, the living, we also have future generations to think about, who must hold us accountable for the decisions we are making today regarding our natural resource endowment. Without taking much of your time, I want to introduce you to our first panelist, Simiso Mlevu. Simiso is the Center for Natural Resource Governance Project Officer for Matabeleland North. She's also our media liaison officer. She's one of the finest researchers I've ever come across. Very passionate about her job. She knows the risks that she takes every day. But I must say, I'm amazed by the passion that she puts into her work. And she's one of the persons who helped to put together this research alongside the entire CNRIG staff. I'm therefore handing over to Simiso to give us the background to the study. And after Simiso, Henry Nyampakoto, the CNRIG programs manager, is going to give us the key findings of the research. We have one of the leading proponents of good governance of natural resources in Zimbabwe, Shamiso Mtisi, the deputy manager, director of the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association. And we have singled also one politician that we invited to also share his reflections on the report, Mr. Jelas Mawarire. So it's over to Simiso for now. Simi, you've got 7 minutes, and after that I'll cut you. Thank you.
Simiso, maybe put your hand up so we know where to unmute you, please.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Simiso, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Simiso.
It's got problems with the internet connection, looks like, for I.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Therefore, we have to move straight to Henry Nyampakoto. I'm sure Henry is also using CNRIG. Henry, can you put up your hand, please, so that you can be identified and unmuted?
Henry, you need to unmute.
Hello, good evening, colleagues. Good evening, everyone.
Evening, Henry. We can hear you.
Okay, that's okay. Can you please allow me to share my screen? All right, I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm going to present the key findings of the research that we... Hello, Ibo?
We can hear you. We can hear you. We can see your screen.
All right. It's okay. I'll proceed. Thank you. So the research was entitled Mortgaging the Future in Return for Power, Zimbabwe's Natural Resources and the 2018 elections. As an introduction, I would like to say that this study and the results that I'm going to outline It's not exhaustive, but we feel it is comprehensive enough to provide or to trigger on how we can establish the role of natural resources in undermining electoral democracy and good governance in Zimbabwe. Also, as an introduction, we all understand that the source of funding for political parties is regulated by the Political Parties Finance Act, whose purpose is to address the illegal or illicit money and foreign funding that can influence electoral outcomes. And we also realize that in Zimbabwe, a political party needs around $30 million US to fund a campaign. And in Zimbabwe, we usually conduct harmonized elections. I would also want to say that there are serious to democracy when illicit money is used to fund political party campaigns, and especially when a country's mineral resources are used as surety for illicit loans that politicians and political parties receive from corporate entities and individuals to fund their election campaigns. So the research that we sought to unravel the extent to which political parties have benefited from dangling Zimbabwe's natural resources to attract funding for their political activities. And in this case, at 2018 elections. But we've also made a reference. We've also made reference to 2018 and 2008 and 2013 elections for comparative purposes, and also to establish some of the trends that are there in terms of how mineral resources are used to fund electoral. The methodology that we used, we interviewed key informants in the parties that were involved, that is ZANU-PF and MPF, as well as some businesses that were involved in the dealings, the lawyers that were also involved in handling some of the conflicts that arose between political parties and some of the businesses. Let me proceed to the findings. In summary, our research found that the electoral activities of the political parties that we have in Zimbabwe are funded by the Treasury, member subscriptions, although they are very little, party business dividends, although they are also very little, largely foreign donations, corporate donations, donations from public and semi-public entities that are parastatals, quid pro quo corporate donations, that is where companies or entities donate in return for favors, and we also need to realize that some of these sources of funding are outlawed according to the Political Parties Finance Act. In most cases, funding that are coming from external sources to political parties are linked to preferential access to natural resources in Zimbabwe. I'll start by political parties. I'll start with ZANU-PF. We found that government-owned entities supported the party through directly to the party's projects, which were disguised as government projects. And this party had access to funds from mineral resources through Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation. Also established that most extractive firms acquire mining rights through the party, and they pay back the cash to the party through party and other activities. And there's also a strong patron-client relationship between these extractive industries and the ruling party. Some of the methods that are finance its political activities include, number one, the sale of mines through Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation. And we have one example of how Bokai mine was sold for $175 million. I hope you can see the flow of funds in the diagram, the flow of funds through several entities or players who were involved in that transaction. As a summary of how that mine was sold for the 2008, ZANU-PF received about 100 million from a deal that was arranged by Billy Rottenbock. The money was paid to Billy through a loan from a company called Lefeva that had a joint venture with ZMDC. The joint venture was called Chodao Mining Private Limited Company. The money was used to finance the campaign in the election runoff. In return, this company called Lefeva Finance got 100%. In fact, the total that was paid for the sale of Bokai mine was $175. Bokai mine
175 million.
Sorry, Farai.
$175 million.
Can I proceed?
$175.
So that mine was eventually intricate web of shelf companies that were registered in the British Virgin Islands. And ultimately from that deal, Billy Rottenbock get 75 million, whilst
We've lost you, Henry. We've lost you.
Henry, I don't know if he is still online there. He is still there, I can see him.
Still online for I, but we're not getting him.
Okay. Anyway, as Henry is rejoining, I would want to add that when that company was sold to CAMEC, Central African Mineral and Exploration Company, for 175 million, it was valuated by the same company a month later at $1 billion US, which means Zimbabwe was prejudiced of $825 million just because we needed a quick fire to fund an election. And that company could even sell the company further, getting hundreds of millions of dollars. And you can ask, what would that mean if that money was used appropriately by the Zimbabwean government for social services? I'm glad Henry is back. Henry, would you want to continue?
Fry, maybe if Henry can keep sharing his screen, you can talk us through.
Okay, Henry.
All right, that's okay. Sorry for that. Sorry for that. My internet is not stable, but let me proceed. So the other method that used to finance its electoral activities was the sale of diamonds. We all remember the Nikuvu projects, international projects of 2013 elections, which presented a budget of 3 billion for ZANU-PF election activities. And how was this 3 billion sourced? We discovered that 800 million was obtained from Mbada Diamonds in Anjin, 85 from Joseph Kabila, 92 million from Equatorial Guinea, 2 million from Muhammad Musa, the late, and Nick Van donated 3 million. We also discovered that the balance was raised through shared sales of Marange Diamonds, mainly to Mr. Sempa of Sino Zimbabwe and China Sanango. In the same year of the elections, about 16,000 carats were shipped out of Zimbabwe. That's the evidence. Another 20,000 carats were so shipped out of Zimbabwe to Angola. And all these diamonds were sold to finance some special interest projects, which were basically election activities for ZANU-PF. The other method that the party used to finance elections or electoral activities for the party were mining joint ventures. In 2009, this is an example that we picked. A company called New Reclamation Group, or Reclam, I'll call it Reclam, entered a joint venture with Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation. Reclam had no previous experience of mining or mining diamonds, but it managed to partner with a ZMDC to form, it was Marange Resources, which partnered with Reclam to form Mbada Diamonds. And Reclam was supposed to pay, in fact, it paid 100 million US dollars to capitalize the venture. And this money was not supposed to be withdrawn, but it was paid to the party. Reclam went to register a shelf company in Mauritius, which is called Grandway Holdings, which eventually ended into the joint venture with Marange Resources. Was issuance of mining license and rights. Here I'm giving two examples here. One is that of the joint venture that was or trading, chrome trading license that was offered to Gamester Holdings, Hanam and Partner, and the Mikos Group for the export of raw chrome after the export of raw chrome was banned 11, and that due 2 million US dollars was paid to the. We also have evidence that in 2018 elections, for the 2018 elections, Mr. Kudakwa Shitagwirei purchased 60 of the 210 vehicles for the ZANU-PF parliamentary candidates in return for an opportunity to buy into the GDI platinum through his Landela mining venture. And today we all know that GDI platinum was offered a tax holiday for the next 5 years, starting from January 2020. And for those 210 vehicles for 2018 elections, 150 were bought by Mr. Moti in return for 300 hectares of chrome mine fields between Shurugu and the Zushawani in Midlands. So in conclusion, we found that the funding for the party chiefly came from state companies, corporations, private companies, and wealthy individuals in the extractive sector. The MDCA Alliance. We did not find any evidence linking the party to the use of country's mineral resources for the 2018 elections, although we realized that although the party is still in the opposition side of politics, there are some policies or policy documents within the party that shows that if ever the party is going to get into power, it is high likelihood of also dangling national mineral resources in exchange of funding by foreign business interests. There was also some information of substantiated claims that the party MDCA received some funds from and also from some local NGOs for the 2018 elections. Then the third party that participated in the 2018 elections is a National Patriotic Fund. Did not find any evidence that the party was financed by any funds from natural resources. Although the former late President Robert Mugabe had promised to fund the party, he had promised to $30 million US, but that did not happen. And we also picked that the party only got about $460,000 US that are based in South Africa for the purchase of 11 vehicles, although those 11 vehicles were not bought as well, but they got 120,000 for their 8 parliamentary candidates. Then the last party that participated in the elections, that's MDCT, that is headed by Madam Chokozani. We did not find any evidence of the funding of that it got from natural resources. We also need to realize that when Dr. Cooper registered MDCT for the purpose of the 2018 elections, Treasury had already disbursed funds to MDCT, which is now MDCA, so there are no funds for their elections. Some senior MDC officials claimed that this party received substantial funding from Econ and Wireless. Some also claimed that they also received funding from President Mnangagwa and 120,000 from ZANU-PF. In conclusion, we realized that political parties with access to more financial resources gain increased access to the electorate. They use their flamboyance to attract votes and giving hand. ZANU-PF attracts funding using the abundance of natural resources in the country, the resources that are supposed to be attracting revenue for not for political convenience of the ruling party. We also realized, or we can at this point conclude that natural resources are being plundered by politicians. Allies, the allies, whoever agrees to fund their campaigns to remain in power. Method of attracting funding, if given opportunity to lure friendly funding partners for political activities. It is therefore important to conduct for the depoliticization of the natural resources sector to secure better and equitable benefits from natural resources.
Okay. Thank you very much, Henry. I think the major points had already been presented. So I would like to encourage us to hold on to our questions or comments. And now I'm going to invite Jealousy Mawarire. Jealousy is a spokesperson of the National Patriotic Front, NPF. And I would like him to give us his reflections on the presentations that was made by Henry. So it's over to you, Jealousy. You have got only 7 minutes. And after that, I'll cut you off. Thank you.
Thank you, Farai. That's a lot of time for me. I've listened to the presentation and I've found it very startling that we have national resources, especially our minerals, that are being plundered and that are being used by one political party to remain in power. I think that's a grim painting of the situation that the last presenter did, and it is quite something that is very striking, if not baffling, that it has been allowed to go on like that without other political parties challenging that in a sustained and substantial way. Be that as it may, I would like to believe that yes, the situation has been painted as grim, but what is it that we should do as Zimbabwe? And from the presentation, what I've seen is that I think I've located 2 major problems. One, that the government or the state owns mineral resources and through ZMDC. Then 2, there's military or security sector participation in the extraction of mineral resources, which is something that I believe should be stopped if the political playground, the electoral playground could be fair and level in the forthcoming elections. So I would like to believe that, let me start by saying that the first thing that I propose after hearing the presentation is that we need really to put legislation in place that stops the government from owning or being involved in mining of minerals. One, because the government is both a referee and a player in the extractive industry. They are the ones, or the government is the one that gives licenses. But we also find out a situation where the government also participates in mining through ZMDC and also through other state arms like your army, like your police, like your CIO. So that should be stopped unless otherwise we are creating a fertile ground for nurturing some form of warlord in this area. So one thing that we need to do is to ensure that government functions where it functions properly in legislation, putting legislation that governs the mining sector. Because what we're really talking about the mining sector and how this mining sector has been abused by the ruling party in order to finance its own electoral processes. So the government has to be taken out, and because this is the avenue that the ruling party has been using actually to get into mining, to exploit the mineral resources. So legislation should be put in place that government should only be involved in the mining sector in as far as it relates to government giving licenses and also the government collecting taxes from the various mining activities. And that should be done. Then the second thing that needs to be done is to ensure that the security sector is removed. Because if you look at that presentation, you will find out that the mining activities that have been happening, some of the mining activities that have been alluded to, are mining activities that have been carried out by the security sector, for instance, Anjin. And this security sector, with our knowledge that the security sector is linked to the ruling party, we have had a situation where the security sector has been mining on behalf of the ruling party. You can also even, I think this is something that is outside this report, the topical issue that people have been talking about, the Kubimba mine, where I'm made to understand that a company owned by the army called Penny East sold equity, which was valued at around 28 million, and I'm made to understand that the discussions lasted from 8:30 to 11 a.m. And after 11 a.m., when people then broke for tea or for lunch or for some snacks, 30 minutes after they'd broken for some eats, when they came back on the table, the 28 million had already been paid into the account of Pennies to seed off the equity that the army held in the mining activities that are happening in the Great Dyke. And now we are seeing that the same mine now, we are being told that some white commercial farmers are being given equity in that mine. And you tend to wonder what is really going on. Who are the white commercial farmers? Are these just ZANU-PF France? Because ZANU-PF is now preparing for 2023 elections, and maybe now the conduit will be the so-called white commercial farmers who are now, we are told, being given equity valued at around 350 million, and you wonder where the 350 million is coming from. So all those things, you know, the government is allowed to do that because we have allowed the government to also involve itself, one, in owning the mineral resources and also in being a participant, being a participant. And that has to be stopped. The army also has to be stopped. And the only way we can, it's not the only way, but the way that I suggest that the army can be stopped from mining activities is to ensure that the National Security Council and the Joint Operations Council, the JOC, be made really the fourth arm of the state. Make it a constitutional creation, make it funded by the national fiscus through the constitution, make it a constitutional creation so that we create a National Security Council that is financed by the national fiscus, and the percentage that is supposed to be given to this National Security Council should be defined in the constitution. Maybe it's 10% of the national budget, so that we don't have a situation where the sitting president really dictates how much the National Security Council gets and end up financing clandestinely the National Security Council, and thereby ensuring that the so-called command element of the security forces end up ingratiating themselves to the sitting president, because that's where the money is coming from. The money has to be constitutionally allocated through the national budget, and it should be known. If it is 10% of the national budget, if we have a budget of 8 million, we have to ensure that we give 800 million to the National Security Council. And this money should be subject to audit by the Auditor General. Then also the government should really not be allowed to participate in mining. The mining sector really should be left to Zimbabweans. And I believe, and I'm very persuaded, that we have a lot of debt capital in this country, and that debt capital can be utilized in mining activities and empowering our own Black people to participate in mining activities. And we remove the government completely from mining. For instance, let's say we have a venture, and this I would allude to the indigenization policy that has been scrapped. I'm a proponent of the indigenization policy, and I believe that our people can be empowered and our people have the money to participate in mining activities. For instance, we have around 2 million houses with title deeds, house owners with title deeds in this country. And let's say, for argument's sake, each house that each of the 2 million owns average is 40,000 United States dollars. That's easily 8 billion that you can mobilize from that sector alone. The other sector that can also be utilized is the agricultural sector. Give people that benefited from the land reform title deeds, and you release about 7 billion United States dollars that was taken out of the market through the land reform. So
2 minutes to round up, Mr. Mawarire.
Hello?
2 minutes. 2 minutes
Okay.
to round up.
So those two sectors only can create about 15 billion. So let's say we have a mining venture, and we have an indigenization policy that subscribes that a technical partner, foreign technical partner, comes in with 49% and is allowed to raise 51% locally. And that 51% is available. I have alluded to the housing sector. I've also alluded to the money that you can unlock if you give people title deeds. So let's say we have a mining venture that is with a partner who can come in with 49 million. And that technical partner should be allowed to raise the remaining 51 million. And he or she can easily mobilize that. Even our own tobacco farmers, we have realized around 500 million this year. And 10% of 500 million is 50 million. So tobacco farmers on their own can raise 50 million and participate, whether in mining or whether in agrochemical industries. So it's really a question of, first of all, making our banking sector work, and putting a legislative framework that would dissuade the government from directly participating in mining activities, the security sector directly participating in mining activities. That can be done if policy is enacted. And I think this is what Zimbabweans should be talking about, and seeing how we can actually use our legislative framework to ensure that the national resources that we are talking about are exploited by our own people, even if they go into venture with foreign technical partners.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mawarire. That's a mouthful there. Very brilliant, ideas, which, if taken into consideration, I think they can really be a game changer. He's talking about the capital retention. How do you build a strong economy when all the investors are coming from outside the country and they don't invest anything in the country? The Chinese come, they do their things, they take everything out of the country. They don't even bank with our local banks. That's why our financial sector is struggling, because we are not investing in our own people. We prefer someone coming from the East. I'm going to now call Shamiso Mtisi, the Deputy Director of the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, one of the leading voices advocating for good governance of natural resources in Zimbabwe. Shamiso, the floor is yours. You've got 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Farai. Thanks, everyone. Unfortunately, my connection cannot sustain a video presentation. As said, I'm the Deputy Director of the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, which is a public interest environmental law group. We've done quite a lot of work in the natural resources sector, and have also done some work before on the link between natural resources and politics. And the insights I'm going to offer today are related to just making a few comments on the report and also offer some views on what can be done to promote sustainable management of natural resources, as that is what I was asked to do. So it will focus much more on what can be done to ensure sustainable management of natural resources, in particular mineral revenues and resources that we have in Zimbabwe. I do quite a lot of work on diamonds. I am the global coordinator of the Kimberley Process Civil Society Coalition, which looks at trade of conflict diamonds. I focus quite a lot on responsible sourcing conflict minerals, especially in the diamond mining sector. So that positions me to most of the time assess the situation in the more than 80 countries in the world that are part of the Kimberley process. So that gives me a flair, a good flair of information on the mineral resources sector, and in particular diamonds. But when it comes to the connection between politics and natural resources, the connection is quite evident. And I think across Africa, many politicians or political parties, especially the incumbent ones, take advantage definitely of their position to get quite a lot of revenues from the natural resources sector or the mining sector for purposes of supporting campaigns, for purposes of supporting elections. And I think it's a common script across Africa when it comes to this kind of connection. One can give quite a number of examples, whether from whether Uganda and UAE and many other countries across the world. So there's a link between natural resources. It might be oil, it might be minerals, it might be wildlife, it might be any other resource that one can think about. So political parties and politicians tend to benefit quite a lot from the natural resources sector. So as an organization, we once did a research on legislative environmental representation, where we were looking at the connection between elections, politics, and natural resources. And we were looking at the electoral promises, we were looking at the manifestos of political parties, and found that a lot of politicians normally promise heaven and earth when it comes to tapping natural resources for the benefit of the people, but that never materializes whenever those politicians are elected into office. So, which raises quite a lot of questions around why do you make those kind of promises when you cannot fulfill them once you are elected into power? So I think the other element that we have observed, and I'm sure this report is quite important in positioning the kind of discourse, is around the motions, questions that are often asked in Parliament. If someone makes a promise that they will use mineral resources for purposes of transforming the economy, has that resulted in any transformation of the economy? Or even in situations where natural resources revenues are used clandestinely or illegally for purposes of campaigning or nesting political ambitions, does that then result in that person, for example, ensuring that the people or the economy benefits? I think those are the kind of questions that we often are faced with. So I think as I indicated, normally intentions of political parties are reflected in the political manifestos. And I think from the political manifestos, you can see that this political party is likely to benefit from the natural resources, or is likely to get revenues from natural resources, and also see what they are promising to the electorate. So that connection is evident, and like I said, it's across the world. Then I also wanted to make just a few comments on the issue of the state security involvement in business. I think this is not new or peculiar to Zimbabwe. If you look at many countries across Africa, even in the world, Transparency International at some point did an analysis of China, Cambodia, and other countries, and there was a very clear connection when it comes to state security involvement in some of the natural resources related businesses. And some of those countries actually took some steps to divest, in particular asking the state security to divest from certain businesses. And in situations where state security is involved in such kind of businesses, I think the thing is about what kind of measures, what kind of ways can be instituted to promote transparency, accountability, and making sure that the people themselves and the economy benefits from such investments. And that kind of discourse is quite important when it comes to situations where state security is involved in natural resources management projects. And I think that's the kind of discourse that we should also be having, so that at least we start talking about how can we enhance transparency and accountability, and making sure that the people benefit, and making sure that the revenues go towards service delivery, go towards ensuring that the people get adequate electricity, the roads, water, and so forth and so on. So I think that's an important discourse that, given this report, we should be moving towards in ensuring that whatever investments are for the benefit of the people. So that's, for me, that's an important set of discussion that we should be having. And the other thing in terms of what can be done when it comes to proper management of natural resources to contribute to sustainable development, since that's what I was asked to talk about. I think if you look at the sustainable development goals, we are looking at poverty, we are looking at health, we are looking at the environment, we are looking at climate change, we are looking at many other aspects of development that are key for the people. And I think given those kind of goals in the context of government plans to ensure that the economy is transformed, I think the mining sector is a sector that the country should leverage on in terms of enhancing that, enhancing economic development. So in that context, one of the key ways in which we can try as much as possible to de-link illegality, politicization of issues, and also enhancing that, enhancing revenue, channeling of revenue towards social services, is to promote transparency and accountability measures. Take, for example, the extractive industries transparency initiative, which might actually lead to disclosure of revenues for everyone to understand what's coming from the mining sector, how much money, what is the production like, how much has been produced by this particular company, and how much did it pay to government, and what did government receive in return from a particular company, maybe in a disaggregated manner. So that kind of initiative is quite important. I think over the years, we've always been encouraging the Zimbabwean government to join the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative as a way of enhancing public understanding of revenues coming from the mining sector into the national economy. So that can also help eliminate any cases of corruption or any misunderstanding or speculation that often happens in the public domain. So joining EITI does not mean that you are subjecting yourself, the country, to any foreign prescriptions as well. But Zimbabwe can go it alone. Zimbabwe can just develop a domestic framework for transparency and accountability in the mining sector, maybe even without joining EITI, but something that can work locally. It's well acceptable. I think this is something that can definitely be done, and we can follow the laid out constitutional measures when it comes to financial accountability, financial probity, and many other requirements that are there in the Constitution. So the Constitution is a very good a document that can give us grounding to promote transparency and accountability in the sector. And in that way, then we might start thinking, we might then start saying, yeah, so there's a lesser connection between politics and the mining sector. Then I think the other thing definitely is to make sure that in a situation where you have political parties, especially in a situation where you have people using resources, natural resources for political campaigns and things like that. The most important thing is to see services being provided to the people. That's very, very, very important, because yeah, if a political party goes into power and there's no service that is visible to the people, that raises a lot of questions, whether that money is going into the pockets of a few individuals instead of serving the people. So I think those kind of issues are very important to discuss.
1 minute, 1 minute,
okay.
Shamiso.
Okay. Then the other aspect, because you asked me about a sustainable development. I think the important thing is when it comes to environmental issues, we've seen a lot of environmental damage, disregard of environmental impact assessments and all that kind of thing, especially in cases where you have state institutions that are running businesses, or businesses that may be connected to certain political parties or politicians, and they disregard the environmental laws. I think it's important to make sure that everyone complies with the environmental systems or the environmental standards that are set. Then I also wanted to talk briefly about formalization of the artisanal mining sector, with the explosion of a lot of people going into artisanal mining. It's high time that government start thinking about formalizing the artisanal mining sector. South Africa has actually circulated a policy related to formalization of the artisanal mining sector. And I think this is how government can ensure that we kind of depoliticize and try as much as possible to smoothen this situation where some people may try to manipulate the artisanal mining sector for political gain, but rather formalize it, make sure that the artisanal miners get permits and are able to operate formally. Then also curbing leakages that often happen when it comes to minerals, especially gold. Through our porous borders, it's quite important that we strengthen our systems when it comes to detection of any illicit trade of minerals, especially gold, or other illicit financial flows that are happening. Then I think right now, the other institution I just wanted to touch as a last point relates to the Zimbabwe Investment Development Authority, ZIDA, in terms of ensuring that we kind of make sure that that institution tries as much as possible to institute systems that can allow proper behavior, especially by companies that are licensed, foreign companies. I think the ZIDA Act itself is very clear that institutions or businesses that are licensed or that go into joint venture projects should adhere to human rights, should adhere to environmental rights, should adhere to sustainable development principles. It's very clear there in the ZIDA Act, and that protection of investments is very clear. So it's also provided for in that piece of legislation. So those are some of my insights when it comes to sustainable management of natural resources. So I thought I should just connect the different pieces when it comes to use and management of natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamiso. I think both our respondents concur that there is a negative correlation between natural resource extraction and elections in Zimbabwe. This is an indictment on our mining model that it is not speaking to the needs of the Zimbabwean people. The poverty in mining areas in Zimbabwe is very depressing. If you go to places like Marange, you go to Wange, you go to Mtoko, you go to Mroa, and many other places where mining is taking place, the poverty in those particular areas cannot be explained. This means we need dialogue with the policymakers, with the government, with the Ministry of Mines, with the Office of the President, that what do we want out of our mineral wealth as a country? Do we want to continue enriching the rich, or we want to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, those who have and those who do not have? Shamiso talked about the sustainable development goals. How do we meet our own targets when the resources are only for elections and for power? Ladies and gentlemen, we are getting to probably the most important segment of this webinar. That is your opportunity to ask questions or pass comments in response to the findings of the research, and also the input from the discussants, that is Shamiso and Jelas Mawarire. So if you want to say something, show me by raising your hand, and then we will pick you so that you can make your contribution. So far, I haven't seen any hands. Okay. Ngoni. I find Ngoni there.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ngoni, please proceed.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand option. It wasn't there, so I only put the thumbs up.
No problem.
Right. Okay, so two things that I picked that are quite interesting to me. The first one is linked to the idea of really like relinquishing the hold on mineral resources. And for me, one thing that I understand is that, and I think O'Brien is actually mentioned in regards to this, that relinquishing that hold on mineral resources is more or less like relinquishing the hold to power, so to speak. And what I'm noticing is from the comments of Mr. Mawarire, it more or less seems like that's more or less like the idea to say, let's focus on putting measures that can actually ensure that there is that relinquish of hold to power, so to speak. That is my interpretation. And when Shamiso talks about transparency as well, it more or less seems like there is that more or less some relinquishing of power by opening up to the values that are actually like realized within the sector itself. And it seems that there is like a lack of like the will to be transparent and to be accountable. So my question is, how do we really negotiate that will into existence, and where exactly is the starting point? Because even from writing scholarship in academia here, we've been writing about these issues. But the question is, how do we kind of negotiate these things into existence, especially in a militarized state like Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Ngoni. Very, very important point you raised there. And I'm sure our panelists are going to try to navigate that question. Do we have anyone else? Yes, we have Alexander Sero and Naitai Fungai. And if you're speaking directly to someone, please mention the name of the person you are addressing your question to so that they prepare to respond to you. Thank you. Over to you, Alexander. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mkoma Farai. Thank you for the illustrious panel with passionate panelists to things that matter. My question is more or less a follow-up to what Ngoni has said, but it's directed to Mkoma Jelas. Mkoma Jelas has given a solution that the most immediate solution, given that all this is happening at the backdrop of another watershed election in 2023, which more or less there are certain signals that history is likely to repeat itself. How then do we galvanize the legislative agenda, given that the parliament is paralyzed, the civil society is in a state of comatose, the national body politic, there is a lot of depoliticization, there is a lot of a conspicuous absence of a polity, of a people from the political scene. How is this going to be feasible under the current predicament where Zimbabwe is actually choking under totalitarian military dictatorship? How is legislation feasible in those realities? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. A very critical question you posed there. How again do we navigate our treacherous political waters to try to start depoliticizing our mineral wealth from being in the clutches of those with power and guns to ensure that they benefit that little girl in the rural areas that grainy, and ensure that our natural resources breathe life into our ailing economy. Where do we start? Naitai Fungai, then we'll pause and allow the speakers to respond.
Thank you so much. I think you can hear me.
Very well, sir.
Thank you. I don't know who exactly is going to answer me, but firstly, I want to thank you, CNRG, for a well-done research. My issue is to do with the transparency and the issue of negotiation of contracts, where we always know that the Chinese are involved in mining sector. Who is involved in negotiating these contracts? And again, how can the CSO and the CBOs be involved in contract negotiation so that at least the issues of transparency and accountability are improved? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fungai. He's talking about the democratization of the natural resource governance. How do we ensure that the people in the communities are also on the table when natural resource contracts are discussed? Someone said, if you are not on the table, then you are in the menu. I will now leave this time to the panelists to respond to all or some of the questions that have been asked by the three colleagues. Thank you. Can I start with Henry? Okay. Jealousy, can you please come in?
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
I'm trying to start my video. Okay. Hello?
Yes, please proceed, Mr. Mawarire.
Hello? All right. I think there have been a number of questions that have been directed at me, and from my own, that the people who asked the questions are referring to. How do you, maybe let me start by answering the last speaker who asked who is involved in the negotiation of this contract. And I would like to answer him using an example that is in the report about who negotiated for the Marange diamonds, the Mbada diamond. It was the ZMDC, and it was the board Africa to go and scout for potential analysis and their own subjective decisions, whereby they ended up actually identifying a technical partner who didn't have even experience. According to their own minutes that are included in this report, they ended up settling for a technical partner who did not have any mining equipment, any diamond mining equipment, or any experience in diamond mining. So the ZMDC has been used by government to negotiate for this contract. And when we are talking about government in Zimbabwe, we know of that black delineation using a jacket code of the government that is negotiating for these contracts. I think that's the short of it. And I'm answering using information that is coming from the report itself. Then Mr. Rusero, maybe Dr. Rusero, I would like to believe, asked how we can change legislation. The best case scenario would be that we put in advocates' work now before the elections to say maybe there are opportunities even for private member bills to push and advocate that we should have a legislative framework that stipulates both the provider of mining licenses and also participants in mining. That is the best case scenario. You push it and you push it through parliament if parliament was working. But he has alluded to the fact that parliament is not working. So if parliament is not working and we have a situation where the participation in our extractive industry has become political, what do? You also assume a political solution, a political trajectory to achieve what you want. And that's where then the political party participate in the 2023 election. Give us alternative legislative framework, alternative issues that we mobilize people around. For instance, it is very easy to see that the government through ZMDC since 2000 has been owning 21 mining companies. And out of the 21, 15 have closed. And some of those that have closed, Shabani Mashava, Kamativi, all those mines have closed. So it has shown that government has no capacity to run these mining activities. Even if government through ZMDC and the Zimbabwe Consolidated Mining Diamond Company owns more than 21 mines in this country. But out of the 21, 15 are not working. They are not operational. So given that position, it's easy then to mobilize our people, conscientize our people that no, we, as a political party, we are advocating that the government that we are going to form is going to put in legislative framework that will ensure that government will only operate in the mining sector in as far as government provides mining licenses and in as far as government collects taxes on behalf of the people, and actually providing a framework where 49%, and I would like to push the indigenization policy, because the indigenization policy is a policy that has been vilified by a lot of people. It has been vilified because its implementation was utterly bad. But because the implementation was utterly bad, it does not make the policy a bad policy, because the implementation and the outcome might be bad because you have implemented a bad, you have thoroughly implemented a bad policy, or you have a good policy that has been badly implemented. And in this case, I think the indigenization policy was implemented in a wrong way, where the government was saying if a technical partner is coming to participate in a venture that needs $100 capital, the foreign investor should come in with the $100. But once you come in with your $100, then the state will take $51 of the $100. When actually I think those that promulgated, or the people that are advocating for the indigenization policy like us, we are saying, if we have a venture that costs $100, let's look for a technical partner that will come in with $49, and let's mobilize the $51 from among our people, and let's make our people benefit. And that's the indigenization policy that we're talking about. And I believe that such a framework can be sold to the electorate. And once it's sold to the electorate, it means if a political party that can communicate that position clearly to the electorate, it's supposed to get political capital from such kind of political communication. And if they can mobilize and get votes around those issues, then it will be then incumbent upon that political party, if they win an election and come into government, to then change the legislative framework. That's the long short of it. But the most immediate will be, let's push, even if it is private member bills, if it is advocacy work that is being done even by CSOs, to ensure that there is discourse to dissuade the government from participating as mining. Or if there's any other question that I didn't
Thank you. You did answer jealousy. Thank you very much for that comprehensive response. Putting natural resource governance at the heart of electoral democracy. It's high time that our political parties start arguing on the basis of how best to utilize our natural resources for the good of the nation. So I have Moses Semayo, Zika Maibere, and Tony Rila in that order, please. If Moses is not there, Zikamai, are you still there? Tony, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a very important topic, but I want to raise a couple of issues in respect of elections. I think the points that people are making about the need for comprehensive national resource governance and the need for it to contribute to the national well-being of the country is incredibly important. But elections are a different beast. So I want to raise for the commentators, and this comes from previous discussions that we've had on this platform, there are two factors that are critical to elections. One of them is that the coercive power of the state is a material factor in producing an election result. It's added to, I think, by the use of the extractive resources to create the notion of a credible election. In other words, the money used for campaigning, for posters, etc., all creates the veneer of a genuine election. It means it looks like an election. But in the end, what really matters in elections are the first factor I've talked about is the fear of the state and its coercive power. And the second is to go to the points that Jonathan Moyo has made in his book on Excelgate, is that whatever the processes are before, whether it's coercive or fancy advertising by the use of illicit funding, what matters in the end is who counts the votes. And I think that's the important thing in the end, is that the power of an election depends on the process, undoubtedly. But the final result in the election is who counts and how do you count. And what we saw in Excelgate in 2018 was a way in which the courts and the electoral authority collaborated to produce an outcome that had nothing to do with the actual voting. So no matter how you spend the money and where you get the money from, in the end, all that matters is how do you count and what process do you use the counting for to create the plausibility for an election that election observers will accept. Now, this is not to diminish the importance of all of this research or the links to the kind of cartel reports that have come out. This is a useful addition to it. But I think we do have to see, as several people have pointed out already, that elections are a very, very difficult beast. And the money is important, but so is the process and the manipulation of the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Very sobering thought there, that elections are a different beast, to quote you there. Moses Semayo, I see your hand is still raised. Do you want to speak?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Magoo. My question is, what lessons can we draw from the Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, especially on the extractive industry, before ours explodes into a fully fledged war? What can we learn from the Mozambican situation? Thank you.
Brilliant question. Thank you very much, Mr. Semayo. What lessons can we learn from the unfolding conflict in Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado, a place very much endowed with natural gas and oil, and which is plunged into conflict because of poor governance. Zikamai, I see your hand again. Would you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Hope you can hear me now.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, just to first congratulate you and your team on this very important investigation. I think what is most saddening is that these public resources are used not only to buy fancy t-shirts and purchase fancy adverts, but that they are actually used in the process to commit an atrocity due to the levels of violence that our elections have always been associated with. Now, my question is, if an election time and again delivers bloodbath, what moral responsibility do those who participate in it have to step back and still retain their legitimacy as politicians? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dzikamai. Dzikamai is a frontline human rights defender, is the director of Zimbabwe'S. And I think panelists, you've heard his question, and also the question by Moses on Cabo Delgado, and also Tony's point or comment on elections in terms of who, it's a matter of who counts. So can I allocate it this way? Shamiso, can you come in on the Cabo Delgado question? You can also touch on other questions. And then after that, I want Jealousy and Henry to also respond to some of these questions. But Shamiso, please, can you go first?
Thank you, Farai. I think I will just, 3 points that I want to make comments on. The first is around contract negotiation. I think Jealousy has already talked about some of the aspects involved, but I think one of the key issues to focus on is the existing legislative framework around contract negotiation as to who negotiates contracts and what's the framework like. The legal framework is actually there. The Constitution is very key when it comes to contract negotiation. The Constitution provides for the opportunity for Parliament to come up with an act that would promote the negotiation of mining concessions. And that is very key. Then also other provisions related to transparency and accountability that are there in the Constitution. But we still have to see what kind of framework the legislature will come up with. Although at the moment one can start talking about the Procurement Act, which is already in existence. And then also, as I referred to earlier on, the Zimbabwe Investment Development Act, which is very key when it comes to what are called joint ventures. And those are the most problematic ones because they involve state entities and foreign entities, joint venture agreements, or what now are called the PPPs, public-private partnerships. They're regulated in terms of the Zimbabwe Investment Development Act. And that act is very key for anyone to go through because that's the kind of framework that provides the scope and for negotiation of joint ventures. So if you talk about Wange, for example, most of those companies there are joint ventures. If you talk about Marange, it's joint ventures. And any other cases where ZMDC, for example, is involved and where it does not have enough capital to go on its own. So it has attracted foreign investors. So that's done in terms of the ZIDA Act. So it's important for anyone of us who is serious about understanding the contract negotiation process to go through the ZIDA Act. So the process, as Jealous indicated, ZMDC is the commercial arm of government when it comes to investments in the mining sector. So that's why it's done in terms of the ZMDC Act. And in terms of the ZIDA Act, any state institution which intends to go into partnership with any foreign investor is supposed to identify that foreign investor, do some assessments, and then submit a proposal to ZIDA. And then ZIDA is supposed to assess that kind of proposal, and then they take up the process to include approval by cabinet. So approval of joint ventures in Zimbabwe is done by cabinet. So that's very important for anyone to understand when it comes to negotiation of contracts. All these joint ventures that we are talking about in the mining sector are approved by cabinet in terms of the ZIDA Act. So it's important to look at that. However, what the Act also indicates is that ZIDA is supposed to carry out performance assessment of those joint venture investments. And in cases where a joint venture has been entered to, sometimes there are exemptions from compliance with the Procurement Act. There's a certain section in the Act which exempts those joint ventures to comply with certain procurement processes. It's quite important for people to pay attention to such clauses. Apart from that, Tony talked about the coercive power of the state to producing electoral results. I think he said that the issue is about the final result as to who counts and not what money has been used for, maybe for campaign, buying t-shirts and things like that. I think I would disagree with Jonathan Moy there. The thing is, it's a poor assessment of the situation. One cannot just rely on who counts the vote. I think any person is strategic enough to think that if you really want to have some semblance of order or some semblance of credibility, you have to invest in that process. So any political party can invest in trying to make sure that at least there are people who vote for it, for that political party, in order to legitimize victory. Otherwise, if you only invest in those people who do the final vote, you are not investing in some semblance of legitimacy. So I think that's very key. Any political party which wants to steal the elections will definitely try to put some veneer of legitimacy into the system by investing in people, by investing in voters. That's very key. I don't know where, I don't normally make these kind of statements, but it's important for anyone to look at it from that perspective. As to the situation in Mozambique, Farai, I think it's an issue of poor management of the oil and gas finds in Mozambique that we observed in that country. A situation where a government fails to make sure that contracts in the natural resources sector are negotiated properly and are for the benefit of the people. What happened in that country is that most of the contracts were negotiated without parliamentary approval as prescribed in the constitution. I paid quite a lot of attention to the situation in Mozambique when it comes to those contracts that were negotiated in Mozambique as part of the work that I do at the international level. So I think we have a situation where as well local expectations, they need to make sure that things are done properly and transparently is what was lacking.
If you can conclude, comrades.
So yeah. So I think that's part of the resource case, and Mozambique, for your own information, has been trying to join the Kimberley process when it comes to diamonds, but they seem not to be willing to join the Kimberley process. They always blow hot and cold when it comes to joining the Kimberley process. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Shamiso. You talked of the resource case, and I think we need to be very careful as Zimbabweans as well, because the lack of benefits to the majority of the people can trigger resource conflicts, and this we need to be careful about. So thank you very much, Shamiso, for bringing that up. Jealousy, we are now winding down. Can I give you 2 to 3 minutes to just respond to these issues, and then we come to Henry? Unmute yourself, Mr. Mawarire. We can't hear you.
Okay. I was saying I don't know what I'm supposed to be responding to, Farai, because I lost the connection sometime before. So I don't know what
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. There was the question from Moses Semayo that what lessons can we learn from Cabo Delgado in Mozambique? There was also a comment and a question from Zigamai Bere on how natural resources are sponsoring in courts an atrocity in the country. And he also questioned, you know, the idea of participating in those elections. I don't know if I captured it well, Zigamai. If it's not, I can give you a second chance.
All right. I would respond to the last part because I think Shamisa did a fantastic job on the Cabo Delgado issue. You see, the war of liberation that Zimbabweans fought for 16 years, it was a war that was fought on the basis that there was a natural resource that the people were mobilized to believe they were dispossessed of, and they were supposed to repossess the land, to work on it, and to work under it, underneath it. So really, the question is how as political parties are we positioned to mobilize and to conscientize our people that we still have a fight in our hands, that people should be mobilized around. And in this instance, mobilizing our people industry and to benefit from the taxes that accrue thereof. So I think elections are a vehicle, really, that is available for us to mobilize our people to change government, and after government has been changed, then to implement the kind of legislative framework that will be mobilizing our people around. The issue really is that we have to make issues, the issue of benefiting from our natural resources, very central to our campaign message, and mobilize and craft our messaging in such a way that every one of us can understand without throwing technical jargon around it. The idea is to make sure that people can be told that if you have a government that is proactive, a government that is pro-people, everyone can participate in the mining sector if government provides a framework for that. It has been done elsewhere. If you look, for instance, the example of Australia, the gold mining industry in Australia started with the people that they called the diggers. And the government that came in the 1950s came in and provided a legislative framework where the diggers could be availed mining licenses, and they could mine legally and contribute to the national fiscus. And those diggers became property owners and became advocates for change and the democratization of Australia. But it started really by people rallying around an idea. We have heard in the past ZANU-PF mobilizing people around the issue of the land reform, where they were saying the land is the economy and the economy is the land. And they really mobilized a lot of people in the early 2000s, the 2005 election, the 2018 election. They were still mobilizing around that idea. So we can also, as political parties, mobilize our people around the need to ensure that there's democratization of participation in the extractive industries within our country. And how do we do that? That will be then up to the political parties to then disaggregate information in a way that is simple, in a way that is understandable, and in a way that attracts really people to a common cause. And that can be done. And I would like to believe that should be the issue that we should be talking about when it comes to elections. If you look at the election in the United States, the previous election in the United States, it anchored really on how the two main political parties were tackling the issue of the health issue in light of the COVID pandemic. And it became a huge issue. I think in the same light, we can also make the issue of democratization of our natural resources and the mining sector a very critical campaign issue that we can mobilize our people and rally our people so that the best political party that comes up with the best policy and with the best campaign message is supposed to gain votes, to gain currency, political currency out of that issue. And I think it's a very important issue, not only in the sense that we should democratize, but also in the sense that how do we ensure that there is no monopoly, there are no cartels, there is no misuse of national resources to fund individual political party campaigns at the expense of infrastructure development, at the expense of funding our healthcare system, at the expense of even funding our education. So that kind of political messaging can be done and can resonate with our people, and political parties can gain voters out of that.
Thank you, Jealousy. That's very important, valid points you raised there. Simiso, if you're still there, what is the role of civil society, community-based organizations, the media, to address the problem of politicization and securitization of Zimbabwe's natural wealth? In other words, what shall we do as citizens in our various networks, formations, organizations? What is our role in addressing this problem?
Okay, thank you very much, Farai, for the opportunity. Unfortunately, network failed me. I was supposed to give the presentation for society and the citizens is to express their voice, mobilize each other, and speak back to power. You would know that at CNRG, we believe that power responds to power. Citizens have got the power which they are given by the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the power which they are given by different laws governing natural resources in Zimbabwe. So what is needed is to build a movement of affected communities. And well, maybe I'm also being mean to say affected communities, because literally every community here in Zimbabwe has one mineral or the other, has one natural resource or the other. And it is those natural resources that are being abused by the politicians to fortify their stay in power. So the role of the civil society is to build the capacity of the communities, the grassroots communities. I don't see the urbanites helping much in this fight, but it is people who are found in the countryside, the reserves, who are affected. You would know that our Communal Lands Act does not give the people any title to the land. They can be moved anytime. And one of the reasons why we are having displacement here in Zimbabwe is mining. And we have got examples in Marange, where people were moved to other Transao, and they were given land, which is for each family less than 1 hectare. And on that less than a hectare, you are supposed to stay with your wife, with your children, with your livestock. We are supposed to also farm that land to provide for your family. So the model that we are using is not sustainable. It is not favoring the common citizens. So until the common citizens stand up to speak for themselves, to defend their right to their ancestral lands, we are not going to see any change. The politicians are going to continue acting with impunity. And what is disheartening in this whole thing is that when preserved these natural, there are no mechanisms to ensure that they benefit. Yet we talk of devolution of power, and devolution entails that people benefit from locally available resources. We look at section 13 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. It talks of national development. It also says communities have to be involved in the formulation and the implementation of the projects that affect them. But this is not happening. So we need to make sure that as civil society, we build the capacity of the communities to understand the constitution, the constitutional clauses that govern management of natural resources in Zimbabwe. We need to build their capacity to understand the laws that govern natural resources in Zimbabwe. There are various statutes governing natural resources management in Zimbabwe. We also need to push for the amendment of the various statutes like the Communal Land Acts, which are by and large still colonial. They are not serving the interests of Zimbabweans. Yet in the 1960s, there was a rise against the oppressor regime to fight for the rights of the natives who were systematically marginalized. Okay, who were systematically marginalized. So when the citizens are capacitated, when they are aware of their rights, we also need the media to highlight the injustices that are happening as a result of the unhealthy relationship that exists between the state and the extractive companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simiso. Now, before I hand over time to Dr. Mandaza to give his closing remarks, I want to give the panelists, Henry, Jealousy, and Shamiso, 1 minute each to give your concluding remarks. But there is also a question that has been posed by Alfred Siwa on the role or the possible role of wildlife in financing these illicit activities. I don't know if anyone is going to take that, but I want you to respond to the issue of fear. How do we deal with fear? Simiso is talking about raising a national movement of citizens who hold government accountable to decisions which they are making regarding our natural resources. And there is the barrier of fear, where people fear that if I speak out, I'm going to be arrested. If I speak out, I'm going to be abducted. How do we deal with fear so that the Zimbabweans unite in saying, this is not how we want our resources to be utilized. We want to benefit. Everybody wants to benefit from their resources. Henry, can you please respond first? Doesn't seem like we still have Henry. Shamiso and then Mawarire.
Yeah, thanks, Farai. I think, like I said, the issue is about making sure that natural resources benefit the people, and how to make that happen is by having laws, policies that promotes disclosure of revenues. That also includes even the Zimbabwean government joining the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, because it helps in solving some of these problems that we are facing, whether it's corruption or the link between natural resources and politics and abuse of power and illicit trade and all that kind of thing. So I think if we have a situation where there is transparency, accountability in terms of practical measures that are put in place, that may have that may help in resolving the problems that we are facing. So for me, those are important issues. And then practical application and enforcement of the Zimbabwe Investment Development Authority Act, because if you look at that act, if one reads that act, it's very good, except that provision that relates to approval of joint ventures by cabinet. I think joint ventures should be approved by parliament, so it should be reformed. So I think that's very key to take note of. So yeah, I'll pass on the baton to others. I think jealous is, yeah.
Jealous, please, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Farai. I would like to conclude by responding to the question that you posed, that how do you deal with the fear factor? I think the way, there is a way of dealing with the fear factor. And one of the ways, maybe there are ways, but one of the ways is to ensure that almost everyone speaks about on the same thing. If we mobilize and put the discourse within the general polity, it means everyone will be talking about the same thing. Then if you have 15 million Zimbabweans, we have had medical practitioners talking about herd immunity. If we put the discourse and the discourse achieves herd immunity, how many, will it be feasible that any president or any dictator would arrest, let's say, 8 million people who are converging and talking the same thing and pushing the same agenda? I think the issue is that we should take the discourse to the people and let as many people as possible become advocates for participation and the democratization of the extractive industry. I think that's a way. And if we no longer have only Magoo talking about it, it means the government will be having its work cut out if they want to silence us, because we have strength in numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very befitting closing remarks, Jealousy. We need more people speaking and demanding good governance of natural resources in Zimbabwe. It should not be a few organizations, but the whole nation. We need millions of people. And when these politicians come to your constituency, canvassing for votes, don't just ululate at them and sing for them. Take them to task. Demand, what are you going to do to improve natural resource governance and ensure that we too benefit? On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this segment. In fact, we come to the end of the webinar. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time to participate in this very interesting webinar. I want to thank the panelists. They did a very excellent job in outlining the research findings and also responding to them. And I want to thank Dr. Mandaza for creating the platform for us to discuss this issue. Dr. Mandaza, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Farai. And we are grateful to you and your team as NRG for choosing the Surplus Trust Policy Dialogue Forum as a platform to air and discuss this very important subject. As Jealousy has just said, the kind of work you are doing and have been doing for a long time is almost indispensable in the fight, the struggle to safeguard our natural resources and to have them developed, extracted in the interest primarily of the communities in which they are being exploited and for the greater good of the country, not as the cartel reports show that most of the revenues from the extractive industries are going astray, stashed away somewhere. So thank you very much for this immense contribution. As I said earlier, the scheduled policy dialogue and the policy surplus trust is next week, 29th of July. Same time, we are looking at South Africa, acknowledging the failures, exploring the trajectory for a better political economic future. We'll have a lineup of among the best minds in South Africa, looking at the subject. Among them, people like Adam Habib, the Pali Lehola, Mr. Bisi, Eddie Maloka, and many others that you are familiar with, at least from their writings on the subject. So we look forward to meeting you next week, Thursday. Thank you very much and good night.
Kaina komi moto ona bango. Na komi tuna ondele akende ipanda totuaka oh ya nani ye Afrika